Captain Daniel Cross adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform as the transport shuttle approached the massive space station floating in the void between stars. The neutral meeting ground had been specifically chosen for these historic negotiations between humanity and the Zirathi Empire, a species that had remained mysteriously isolated for centuries. At 32, Daniel had earned his reputation as Earth's most skilled negotiator, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for what awaited him on this station. The artificial gravity felt heavier than Earth's standard as he stepped off the shuttle, his boots clicking against the crystalline floor of the docking bay. The architecture was unlike anything human engineers had conceived, with flowing organic curves that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Bioluminescent panels cast shifting patterns of blue and gold across the walls, creating an almost hypnotic atmosphere that made Daniel's pulse quicken with anticipation. "Welcome, Captain Cross," came a voice like liquid music, speaking perfect English with an accent that seemed to caress each syllable. Daniel turned and felt his breath catch in his throat. The woman approaching him was clearly not human, yet her beauty was undeniable and intensely captivating. Her skin held a subtle iridescent quality, shifting between deep blue and silver depending on how the light caught it. Long, flowing hair, the color of starlight, cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes were large and luminous, holding depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. She wore a form-fitting garment that accentuated her graceful figure, its material seeming to shift and flow like liquid metal. "I am Nyxaria, speaker for the Zirathi Council," she continued, extending her hand in what Daniel recognized as an adaptation of human greeting customs. "I will be your counterpart in these negotiations." Daniel took her hand, surprised by the warmth of her touch and the slight tingling sensation that seemed to travel up his arm. "The honor is mine, Speaker Nyxaria. I've studied your peoples, history, and culture extensively. Your civilization's achievements are remarkable." As their hands touched, Nyxaria's eyes suddenly widened, her pupils dilating as if she had received some kind of shock. A flush of deeper blue spread across her cheeks, and she jerked her hand back with a gasp that was both startled and intrigued. "The telepathic revelation. Your thoughts," Nyxaria said, her voice carrying a note of wonder and embarrassment. "They are so vivid, so intense. I did not expect such directness from a human mind." Daniel felt his own cheeks warm as he realized what had happened. The Zirathi were telepathic, and his first impression of her stunning beauty had been broadcast directly into her consciousness. But it wasn't just her physical appearance that had captivated him. It was the intelligence in her eyes, the graceful way she moved, and something indefinable that drew him to her like a magnet. "I apologize if my thoughts caused any discomfort," Daniel said, his diplomatic training kicking in even as his heart raced. Human minds aren't exactly known for their subtlety. Nyxaria tilted her head, studying him with those mesmerizing eyes. "Discomfort is not the word I would use," she replied, her voice soft but carrying an undercurrent of curiosity. "Your thoughts are unlike anything I have encountered. Most minds I touch are guarded, careful. Yours is open, passionate, direct. You are thinking about what it might feel like to touch my skin, to run your fingers through my hair." Daniel's diplomatic composure wavered slightly. "I was also thinking about your intelligence, your grace, and the responsibility we both carry to make these negotiations successful," he said, meeting her gaze steadily. "Human attraction is complex, Speaker Nyxaria. It encompasses much more than simple physical desire." The corridor around them seemed to pulse with energy, and Daniel noticed that other Zirathi who had been moving through the area were giving them a wide berth, their own eyes showing various degrees of curiosity and concern. It was clear that whatever was happening between him, Nyxaria, was unusual even by their standards. Dangerous fascination. "Come," Nyxaria said, gesturing toward a curved corridor that led deeper into the station. "We should begin with a tour of the facilities where our negotiations will take place. Perhaps along the way, you can explain more about these complex human emotions." As they walked, Daniel found himself acutely aware of Nyxaria's presence beside him. The way she moved was hypnotic, each step flowing into the next with an otherworldly grace. Her telepathic abilities seemed to create a field of energy around her that made the air itself seem charged with possibility. "Your people have been isolated for so long," Daniel said, trying to focus on diplomatic matters even as his awareness of her continued to grow. "What changed? Why reach out to humanity now?" Nyxaria's expression grew thoughtful. "Our isolation was born of necessity. Our telepathic abilities make us vulnerable to emotional contamination from other species. For generations we believed that contact with alien minds would corrupt our psychic harmony, but isolation has its own costs. We have grown stagnant, predictable. Our council elders believe that controlled contact with selected species might revitalize our culture. They entered a large chamber with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal, their surfaces shifting and changing color in response to their presence. Floating platforms at various levels provided seating areas, connected by bridges of solidified light that adjusted their opacity based on foot traffic. "This is our primary negotiation chamber," Nyxaria explained. "The crystals respond to emotional resonance, creating an environment that encourages honesty and understanding. They will make deception difficult, if not impossible." Daniel studied the remarkable technology, but his attention kept drifting back to Nyxaria. "And what about personal connections? How do your people handle attraction, romance, love?" Nyxaria's cheeks flushed that deeper blue again, and the crystals around them began to pulse with warm golden light. "Such matters are usually handled with great care among our people. Our telepathic bonds mean that emotional connections are intense, sometimes overwhelming. We have learned to approach such relationships with caution and ritual." "And what about connections with non-telepathic species?" Daniel asked, his voice carefully neutral despite the racing of his heart. The question hung in the air between them, and Daniel could see Nyxaria struggling with her response. The crystals around them were now pulsing in rhythm with what Daniel realized might be their heartbeats, creating a synchronized display of light that was both beautiful and deeply intimate. "Such connections are forbidden," Nyxaria said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "The risk of psychological contamination is considered too great. A telepath who bonds with a non-telepath risks losing their abilities entirely, becoming cut off from their own people." The forbidden's attraction. Daniel felt a chill at her words, but also a surge of something that might have been defiance. "And yet you're here, negotiating with me, reading my thoughts and emotions. Isn't that a form of connection?" Nyxaria moved closer to him, close enough that he could see the flecks of silver in her luminous eyes. "What I am experiencing with you is unlike anything in our records. Your emotions are so vivid, so passionate. When I touched your mind, I felt your desire not just for physical intimacy, but for understanding, for connection that transcends species barriers. It is intoxicating." The crystals around them flared brighter, and Daniel realized that their emotional states were feeding into the room's energy systems. He could feel the pull between them growing stronger, a magnetic attraction that seemed to operate on multiple levels simultaneously. "Speaker Nyxaria," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to be honest with you. What I'm feeling goes beyond simple diplomatic cooperation. You're intelligent, beautiful, fascinating. The thought of exploring a connection with you, despite the risks, is compelling in ways I don't fully understand." Nyxaria's breathing had quickened, and Daniel could see the conflict in her expression. "Captain Cross, Daniel, what you're suggesting could destroy everything we've worked for. If my people discover that I've formed an attachment to a human, they will remove me from these negotiations. Your own superiors would likely react similarly. Then we'll have to be careful, Daniel said, reaching out to touch her arm gently. The contact sent that same electric sensation through both of them, and the crystals around them pulsed in response. But I don't think either of us can ignore what's happening between us. Nyxaria closed her eyes for a moment, and Daniel could sense her internal struggle. When she opened them again, there was a new determination in her gaze. There is something you should know about my people, about our true nature. Our telepathic abilities are not entirely natural. They are the result of the symbiotic relationship with energy beings from another dimension. These beings feed on emotional experiences, particularly intense ones like desire, passion, and love. Daniel felt a chill of understanding. And our connection, the attraction between us, it's feeding them. Yes, Nyxaria confirmed. But more than that, they are fascinated by human emotions. Your feelings are more complex, more intense than done. Anything they have encountered from our people. They are encouraging this connection, pushing me to explore it further. The implications were staggering. Daniel realized that his growing attraction to Nyxaria was not just a personal matter, but potentially a key element in the success of the negotiations themselves. The energy beings that sustained Zirathi civilization were intrigued by humanity, and their fascination could be the foundation for a new kind of alliance. So what happens now? Daniel asked, his hand still touching her arm, both of them aware of the energy flowing between them. Nyxaria's smile was both beautiful and dangerous. Now, Captain Cross, we navigate waters that no diplomat from either of our species has ever charted. We explore this connection while trying to save both our peoples from those who would see it destroyed. As they stood there in the pulsing crystal chamber, Daniel felt the weight of destiny settling around them. What had begun as a routine diplomatic mission was becoming something far more significant, a relationship that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The path ahead would be treacherous, but with Nyxaria beside him, Daniel found himself eager to face whatever challenges lay in store. The crystals around them continued to pulse with golden light, responding to their emotional resonance and broadcasting their connection to the energy beings that sustained Zirathi civilization. In the depths of space, ancient entities stirred with interest, hungry for the complex emotions that only humans could provide. The game had begun, and the stakes were nothing less than the future of both species. 3 days had passed since Daniel's arrival on the station, and the formal negotiations had proceeded with careful precision during daylight hours. But it was during the quiet periods between sessions that the real connection between him and Nyxaria had begun to deepen. Tonight, she had requested a private meeting in her quarters, citing the need to discuss sensitive cultural matters away from the formal negotiation chambers. Daniel made his way through the dimly lit corridors of the residential section, his heart racing with anticipation. The station's bioluminescent panels had shifted to their night cycle, casting everything in soft blues and purples. It made the organic architecture seem even more alien and beautiful. When he reached Nyxaria's quarters, the door seemed to sense his presence and flowed open like liquid mercury. Her private space was a study in Zirathi elegance, with walls that curved seamlessly into each other and furniture that appeared to have grown from the floor itself. Bioluminescent plants provided gentle illumination, their soft glow creating intimate pools of light throughout the room. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy, and Daniel could feel the presence of the dimensional beings that sustained her people. "Daniel," Nyxaria said, rising from a meditation alcove where she had been sitting cross-legged. She wore a flowing garment that seemed to be made of captured starlight, its material shifting and flowing with her movements. "Thank you for coming. There are things I need to share with you, secrets that could change everything." Daniel moved closer, drawn by the magnetic pull he always felt in her presence. "I'm listening." Nyxaria gestured for him to sit beside her on a cushioned area that molded itself to accommodate both their forms. As he settled next to her, Daniel became acutely aware of her warmth, the subtle scent of ozone and exotic flowers that seemed to surround her. "The energy beings that sustain our civilization," she began, her voice soft and intimate in the dimly lit space. "They have been growing restless for generations. Our emotions, familiar to them over millennia, no longer provide the stimulation they need. They have begun to withdraw their support from some of our outlying colonies." Daniel felt a chill of understanding. "Your people are dying." "Slowly, yes," Nyxaria confirmed. "But since your arrival, since our connection began, they have become more active than they have been in centuries. Your emotions, your desires, your complex human nature, it feeds them in ways that our harmonious society cannot." She reached out and placed her hand over his, and Daniel felt the familiar electric sensation of telepathic contact. But this time, instead of the gentle probes he had experienced before, he felt Nyxaria's consciousness flowing into his own, sharing not just thoughts but emotions, memories, and sensations that were uniquely Zirithi. The telepathic bond through their connection. Daniel experienced flashes of Nyxaria's life, her childhood among the crystal spires of her homeworld, her training as a diplomatic speaker, her growing awareness of her people's dependence on the energy beings. But beneath all of that was her fascination with him, her wonder at the intensity of human emotion, and her growing desire to experience everything that connection with him might offer. "Show me," she whispered, her mental voice flowing directly into his consciousness. "Show me what human passion truly feels like." Daniel's response was instinctive and overwhelming. Through their telepathic link, he shared his attraction to her. Not just her exotic beauty, but her intelligence, her strength, the way she moved with fluid grace, the sound of her voice when she spoke his name. He shared his fantasies about touching her iridescent skin, about running his fingers through her starlight hair, about what it might feel like to hold her close and feel her heart beating against his chest. Nyxaria gasped aloud, her eyes widening as she experienced the full intensity of human desire filtered through their telepathic connection. The bioluminescent plants around them flared brighter, and Daniel could feel the energy being stirring with excitement, feeding on the complex emotions flowing between them. "It's so intense," she breathed, her voice trembling with wonder. "Your people feel everything so deeply, so completely. No wonder the beings are fascinated." Daniel could sense her own emotions through their link. Curiosity about physical intimacy, wonder at the complexity of human attraction, and underneath it all, a growing desire that matched his own. The Zirithi, he realized, experienced emotion differently than humans. Their telepathic nature meant that feelings were shared and modulated by the collective, making individual passion a rare and precious thing. "What we're sharing," Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's dangerous for both of us, isn't it?" Nyxaria nodded, but she didn't pull away from their connection. If anything, she seemed to be leaning closer, drawn by the same magnetic force that pulled at him. "My people would see this as contamination, a corruption of our psychic purity. Your superiors would likely view it as a compromise of your diplomatic objectivity. And yet here we are," Daniel said, reaching up to touch her face gently. Her skin was warm and incredibly soft, with a subtle texture that was unlike anything human. "Neither of us seems willing to stop." Through their telepathic link, Daniel could feel Nyxaria's internal conflict. Duty warred with desire, responsibility, battled with curiosity. But stronger than either was her growing realization that what they were experiencing together might be the key to saving both their peoples. "Forbidden desires. There's something else," Nyxaria said, her mental voice carrying a note of vulnerability that made Daniel's heart ache. The energy beings, they're not just feeding on our emotions. They're encouraging deeper connection, pushing for more intimate experiences. They want to understand human sexuality, human bonding, in ways that our people have never explored. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest and spread through his body. The implications of her words were both thrilling and terrifying. Are you saying that our attraction, our connection, it's not entirely our own? I'm saying that it's amplified by their influence, Nyxaria replied, her hand moving to rest against his chest, just over his heart. But the foundation, the genuine attraction and compatibility between us, that's real. They're simply encouraging us to explore it more deeply than either of our peoples would normally allow. The touch of her hand sent electricity through Daniel's entire nervous system. Through their telepathic link, he could feel her experiencing the same sensation, her wonder at the way human physiology responded to emotional stimulation. "Show me more," she whispered, both aloud and mentally. "I want to understand what human intimacy truly means." Daniel's response was to deepen their telepathic connection, sharing not just his attraction to her, but his fantasies about what physical intimacy with her might be like. He imagined tracing the patterns of iridescence across her skin, discovering whether her entire body held that same subtle luminescence. He shared his curiosity about Zirthi physiology, his desire to learn what gave her pleasure, what made her gasp with sensation. Nyxaria's reaction was immediate and intense. Her mental barriers dropped completely, allowing Daniel to experience her own curiosity and growing arousal. Zirthi, he discovered, experienced physical sensation differently than humans, their nervous systems more attuned to energy and emotion than simple touch. But through their connection, she was beginning to understand human physicality in ways that no member of her species ever had. The energy beings around them were practically vibrating with excitement, feeding on the complex interplay of emotion, desire, and discovery flowing between the two lovers. The bioluminescent plants in the room were pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats, creating a synchronized display of light that was both beautiful and deeply erotic. "The point of no return, Daniel," Nyxaria said, her voice carrying both desire and desperation. "What we're doing, it's changing me. I can feel my connection to my people shifting, evolving. If we continue, there may be no going back." Daniel could sense the truth of her words through their link. The telepathic bond they were forming was unlike anything in Zirthi experience, creating new neural pathways in her brain, changing the very nature of her psychic abilities. But rather than diminishing her powers, the connection seemed to be enhancing them, giving her access to emotional ranges that her people had never explored. "Then we make sure it's worth the risk," Daniel said, pulling her closer until they were pressed together, her exotic warmth seeping through his clothing. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Their kiss was electric in the most literal sense. Their telepathic connection, allowing them to share not just the physical sensation, but the emotional impact of their first truly intimate contact. Nyxaria's lips were soft and warm, tasting of exotic spices and starlight. Through their mental link, Daniel could feel her wonder at the complexity of human kissing, the way it combined physical pleasure with emotional connection. But as their embrace deepened, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and Daniel could hear the sound of running feet in the corridors outside. "What's happening?" he asked, reluctantly breaking their kiss. Nyxaria eyes had gone wide with fear, her telepathic abilities picking up distress signals from throughout the station. "It's the Council Elder Velthara," she said, her voice tight with worry. "She's discovered our connection. She's declaring me contaminated, unfit to continue the negotiations." Through the walls of her quarters, they could hear voices raised. In argument, the sound of Zirthi and human personnel trying to maintain order as political crisis erupted around them. "And Admiral Torres," Daniel added grimly. his own intuition telling him that his human superiors had been monitoring his activities more closely than he had realized. My people aren't going to be any happier about this than yours. They stood together in the center of the room, still connected telepathically, still feeling the pull of attraction and the pressure of the energy beings encouraging deeper intimacy. But now they also faced the reality that their relationship had moved beyond the realm of private exploration into a matter of interstellar politics. What do we do? Nyxaria asked, her mental voice carrying both fear and determination. Daniel's smile was grim but confident. We do what humans do best. We improvise, we adapt, and we fight for what we believe in. The energy beings around them pulsed with anticipation, feeding on the complex emotions of love, fear, determination, and defiance flowing between their two champions. Whatever happened next, the connection between Daniel and Nyxaria had already changed both of them in ways that could never be undone. The emergency session convened in the main negotiation chamber within an hour of the alarms, with representatives from both species facing each other across a gulf that seemed wider than the space between stars. The crystal walls pulsed with agitated energy, reflecting the turbulent emotions of everyone present. Daniel stood at one end of the chamber in his formal diplomatic uniform, while Nyxaria occupied the traditional speaker's position, her starlight hair bound in ceremonial braids that marked her official status. Council Elder Valthara was an imposing figure, even by Zirathi standards. Her deep purple skin marked with a ceremonial scarification that indicated her advanced age and wisdom. Her silver hair hung in complex patterns that seemed to move with their own inner current, and her eyes held the cold fire of absolute conviction. Speaker Nyxaria, Valthara's voice carried the authority of centuries. You have violated the most sacred laws of our people. Your contamination by alien emotions has rendered you unfit to represent the Zirathi Council. You will submit to psychic cleansing immediately. On the human side, Admiral Torres was equally stern. A woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to command, she had built her career on discipline and adherence to protocol. Captain Cross, your conduct has been completely inappropriate for a diplomatic mission of this importance. You're relieved of duty effective immediately and will return to Earth for disciplinary proceedings. Daniel felt Nyxaria's distress through their telepathic connection, but also her determination to fight for what they had discovered together. The energy beings were practically humming with excitement, feeding on the intense emotions filling the chamber. With respect, Admiral, Daniel said, his voice carrying the confidence that had made him Earth's premier negotiator, I believe you're making a serious mistake. What Speaker Nyxaria and I have discovered represents a breakthrough that could revolutionize relations between our species. Valthara's laugh was like ice breaking. Breakthrough? You call this contamination a breakthrough? She has allowed alien emotions to corrupt her psychic matrix. The energy beings that sustain our civilization are being poisoned by exposure to your crude human feelings. Actually, Nyxaria said, her voice ringing with new authority, the beings are thriving. For the first time in generations, they are fully active, fully engaged. Captain Cross's emotions haven't contaminated our symbiosis. They've revitalized it. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of the crystal walls. Through their connection, Daniel could feel Nyxaria drawing on reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Her telepathic abilities enhanced rather than diminished by their bond. The revelation, show them, Daniel said quietly, his mental voice reaching Nyxaria through their link. Show them what we've really discovered. Nyxaria nodded and raised her hands, her telepathic abilities reaching out to touch every mind in the chamber. Suddenly, everyone present could feel what she and Daniel had experienced, the intensity of human emotion, the complexity of attraction that went beyond simple physical desire. The way their connection had awakened possibilities that neither species had imagined. The Zirathi delegates gasped as they experienced secondhand the rich tapestry of human feeling. Admiral Torres and her staff were stunned by the depth of telepathic communication possible between the species. But most importantly, everyone could sense the energy beings themselves, more active and vibrant than they had been in living memory. "This is impossible," Vilthara whispered, her certainty shaken for the first time in decades. "Our records show that bonding with non-telepathic species leads to psychic degradation." "Your records are incomplete," Ixaria replied, her confidence growing with each word. "Humans aren't truly non-telepathic. They simply express their psychic abilities differently. Captain Cross and I haven't formed a corrupting bond. We've created something new, something that benefits both our peoples." Through the chamber's crystal walls, they could all see the station's energy readings spiking as the dimensional beings responded to the emotional resonance filling the space. Systems that had been operating at minimal capacity for years were suddenly functioning at peak efficiency. "The beings are feeding," one of the Zirathi technicians reported in amazement. "Energy output is at levels we haven't seen since the historical records began." Admiral Torres was studying her own instruments, her expression shifting from anger to fascination. "The psychic field generated by their connection is unlike anything our scientists have encountered. The potential applications for communication, for cooperation between our species, are staggering." The choice, but even as understanding began to dawn on both sides, opposition forces were mobilizing. The chamber doors burst open as armed guards from both species entered, their weapons trained on Daniel and Nixaria. "Enough of this madness," came a new voice. Commander Voss, one of Admiral Torres's subordinates, known for his rigid adherence to protocol, strode into the chamber with a squad of human security personnel. "Captain Cross is under arrest for violation of diplomatic protocols and contamination by alien influence." Simultaneously, a group of traditional Zirathi entered from another door, led by a young male named Kethvar, whose purple skin was marked with the symbols of the purification caste. "Speaker Nixaria will be taken for immediate psychic cleansing. The contamination must be purged before it spreads." Daniel and Nixaria moved closer together instinctively, their telepathic connection allowing them to coordinate without words. The energy beings around them were practically vibrating with anticipation, and the crystal chamber was beginning to resonate with harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. "Stand down," Admiral Torres ordered, but Commander Voss ignored her, his weapon trained on Daniel. "The contamination ends here," Voss declared. "Earth Command has decided that the risk of psychic pollution is too great. These negotiations are terminated." "You don't understand what you're destroying," Daniel said, his voice carrying both desperation and determination. "This connection isn't contamination, it's evolution." Kethvar raised a device that hummed with psychic energy, clearly designed to disrupt telepathic abilities. "The speaker will be cleansed, and order will be restored." The union in that moment of crisis, Daniel and Nixaria made their choice. Instead of submitting to separation and cleansing, they reached for each other, their hands clasping as their telepathic connection deepened beyond anything they had experienced before. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The crystal chamber exploded with light as the energy beings responded to their complete union. Daniel felt his consciousness expanding, touching not just Nixaria's mind, but the vast network of energy that sustained Zirathi civilization. Through their connection, he could sense the beings themselves, ancient entities of pure thought and emotion, who had been slowly starving on the limited emotional diet provided by Zirathi society. But now, fed by the complex interplay of human and Zirathi consciousness, they were awakening to possibilities that had been dormant for millennia. The chamber itself began to change, its crystal walls reshaping themselves in response to the psychic energy flowing through them. "Stop them!" Voss shouted, but when he tried to approach the bonded pair, he was repelled by a field of pure energy that surrounded them. Through their expanded awareness, Daniel and Nyxaria could sense the entire station, every person aboard. The vast networks of energy that connected the Zirathi colonies, and beyond that, the quantum fields that linked all consciousness in the galaxy. "We can't be separated now," Nyxaria said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from multiple dimensions. "We're no longer just Zirathi and human. We're something new." The energy beings were singing, their joy and excitement creating feedback loops that amplified the psychic resonance throughout the chamber. Daniel could feel his own consciousness changing, gaining new capabilities while retaining his essential humanity. The new Alliance Elder Valfara staggered as the full implications of what she was witnessing became clear. The ancient prophecies, she whispered, the joining of minds across the void, the awakening of the sleeping powers. This is what our ancestors foretold. Admiral Torres was monitoring readings that defied explanation. The energy output from this station could power half of Earth's colonies. If we could harness this kind of psychic resonance, we could revolutionize interstellar communication, maybe even faster than light travel. As the immediate crisis of their bonding stabilized, Daniel and Nyxaria found they could function individually while maintaining their telepathic connection. They turned to face the assembled delegates, their enhanced awareness allowing them to sense the emotions and intentions of everyone present. "The choice is yours," Daniel said, his voice carrying new authority. "You can try to destroy what we've created, attempt to return to the old ways of isolation and limitation, or you can embrace the possibilities we've opened. Our peoples need each other," Nyxaria added, her enhanced abilities allowing her to project her thoughts directly into every mind present. "Humans provide the emotional complexity that our energy partners crave, while we offer the psychic technologies that could transform human civilization." Kethvar lowered his disruption device, his expression showing wonder rather than disgust. "The contamination I sense, it's not corruption. It's growth, evolution. Our people have been stagnating for generations, and this connection offers renewal." "Commander." Voss remained defiant. "Earth Command will never accept this level of alien influence over human personnel." "Then Earth Command will find itself left behind," Admiral Torres said firmly, her scientific curiosity overriding her initial concerns. "The strategic advantages of this alliance are too significant to ignore." The new future in the days that followed, the revelation of Daniel and Nyxaria's successful bonding sent shockwaves through both civilizations. Conservative factions on both sides demanded the separation of the contaminated individuals, while progressive voices called for expanded contact and exploration of the new possibilities. But the energy beings themselves had made their preference clear. Colonies that embraced human Zirathi cooperation found their power systems enhanced and their psychic capabilities expanded. Settlements that rejected the new alliance experienced equipment failures and energy shortages. That could no longer be ignored. Daniel and Nyxaria became the first ambassadors of a new kind of relationship between species, their personal bond, serving as the foundation for treaties that would reshape the political landscape of the galaxy. They established training programs where humans could learn to develop their latent psychic abilities while Zirathi learned to appreciate the full spectrum of human emotion. Their love story became legend, but more importantly, it became proof that the barriers between species were not insurmountable. In the growing network of human Zirathi partnerships that followed, each couple discovered their own unique form of connection, contributing to an ever-expanding web of consciousness that promised to transform both civilizations. The energy beings thrived on this new diversity of experience, their increased activity powering technological advances that neither species could have achieved alone. Faster-than-light communication became routine. Interstellar travel was revolutionized, and the first steps toward a truly galactic civilization were taken. Standing together on the observation deck of their diplomatic station, now expanded into a thriving hub of interspecies cooperation, Daniel and Nyxeria watched as ships from dozens of worlds arrived to study the new technologies emerging from their union. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked, his arm around her waist as they watched the bustling traffic of the new alliance. Nyxeria's smile was radiant as she leaned into his embrace. "How can I regret the choice that saved both our peoples and opened the door to wonders we never imagined?" Their telepathic connection carried deeper feelings than words could express. Love that had grown stronger with each challenge, satisfaction at the changes they had brought about, and excitement for the future they would build together. The energy beings hummed with contentment around them, well fed on the complex emotions of love, hope, and determination that flowed from a growing alliance. In choosing each other, Daniel and Nyxeria had not just found personal happiness. They had opened a door to a future where the galaxy itself might be transformed by the power of connection across the void. Their story was just the beginning. The end